everyone, welcome back to yet another episode of the Gameable Audio. I am your host, Christofer Schenström, and today we're going through with a question of, have you heard of Bomberman? Bomberman is one of those characters that I kind of grew up with, played a lot on my Super Nintendo, so I was like, hey, what the heck, I wanna get down a little bit. Who is Bomberman? Where did it come from, etc. And I've been doing a lot of digging. I have a lot of information surrounding the games that we're talking about, and it is so much fun when I kind of blindly went out there to handpick the different games that I did, and I wanted to pick a little bit of those games that I myself haven't really played and get a little bit more information out of them. And boy, I wasn't surprised. There are some really interesting ones, and to be honest, some new fan favorites of mine considering music. And of course, I want to try all of these games as well. So yeah, I'm on the ones I am able to check out. I will definitely check out. But nonetheless, this is episode 55, and it's been a blast to make so many episodes. And it's fun to return a little bit from the guested episodes as well, to just do a little bit more of a self-induced research and digging on different kind of game characters, game series, etc. And it's so much fun. And I hope you'll join me in for this ride as well as a listener. So, first and foremost, when it comes down to Bomberman, Bomberman is one of those characters that have been around for ages. If I remember correctly, they had some sort of 40-year anniversary not long ago, if not this year. And the reason why I'm a little bit confused about these days and so on is because I don't have each and every date in my head all the time. But we're starting out. So first and foremost, when we're looking at Bomberman as a series, we of course have a couple of developers behind this series. And first and foremost, Hudson Soft started it all out from the beginning. And today we have the studio of Konami that kind of took over with a new series, kind of re-implementing everything again, back a little bit to the classics. But as it all started, the first game in the Bomberman series was released back in 1983. And funny enough, this game was not even named Bomberman outside of Japan. So yeah, in Japan, Bomberman is the I'm making a quote, the rabbit ears, the correct pronunciation of the series. And the first title outside of Japan was actually named Eric and the Floaters, and this was specifically in the UK. Eric and the Floaters were one of those games that kind of introduced the today's classic Bomberman gameplay. However, this game has little to none resemblance of our white hero Bomberman that we know and love today. The first game that arrived outside of Japan as Bomberman is the NES title Bomberman, and this was, of course, like I said, released outside of Japan as this specific title. However, even in Europe, we weren't too fond of the name Bomberman, so the first game was actually named Dyna Blaster. And this was also the first time with the Bomberman title, it was actually introduced with a single-player mode, where the other first Eric and the Floaters were just some sort of arcade-ish type of game. When we're talking about single-player mode, we had some sort of overhanging story to some extent. And in the first game, they actually referenced to an older NES game, that game being named Lode Runner. In this first NES game of Bomberman, there is a robot who is set on escaping his prison of being in this factory that holds him, bombing stuff, etc. But you set up bombs, you destroy these blocks, you destroy the enemies that are floating around trying to stop him, and he basically blasts through these 50 levels. And according to Wikipedia, in the Japanese version, right at the end, the player is told that Bomberman will, and I quote, see them in Lode Runner. However, in the international version of this game, they are basically asked that if they can recognize the form of a protagonist from another Hudson game. And when it comes to the White Bomber character that we love and adore, everybody, I mean, I think the White Bomberman, the classic White Bomberman, is one of the characters that I first and foremost got in contact with. It was Super Bomberman 2. He was designed by Shoji Mizuo, who sadly passed away at the age of 58, and this was on the 11th of June 2018. And just to have everything, like when we talk about this classic white Bomberman, I highly recommend everybody to look up the American box art for Bomberman. And here we are presented with a blue Samus-like character wielding a Samus suit ball in his, well, on the package is on the right side, but it's left hand. And it looks kind of almost like an arm cannon that Samus uses as well on the other side, on his right arm. Much classic to how the Samus suit looks like in the Metroid games. But this is most likely supposed to be some sort of long bomb, because you can see the arm going kind of around it, but it kind of can be portrayed as like this arm cannon. But it looks very similar, I would say, or it kind of looks like it. And there are also two kind of shotgun-like shells in an ammo belt, but these could also be some sort of dynamite. But even though we had this kind of bluish, Metroidish character on the Bomberman art for the American version, we still have this kind of blue, white-ish character in the first Bomberman game. And yeah, we didn't really, until we got to the second game, we got to have this more characteristic white Bomberman character. But the first one was a little bit special, and it kind of stands out to some extent. But anyway, with this said, I think we have a good little grasp on kind of where it started, what was kind of the first set of the series. And with that said, let's head into the first track of the week. And of course, with the first track, we're starting a little bit early with the Dyna Blaster, and this is a unique credit scene from the Amiga version. And for reference, I highly recommend everybody to listen in on both like earpieces or headphones, because if you're only listening on one, it will kind of sound very lame. So highly recommend to pause the episode, put into headphones, so make sure you listen to the full track. Enjoy! And there we're fading out the first track of the week. It was Dyna Blaster and the credits music from the Amiga version. And this is also the stop for our first little segment that will follow up on each and every track. So this is called The Motion is basically me sitting at home, leaning backwards in my chair, and I put the headphones on and just listen to the music on repeat until I feel something. And for Dyna Blaster credits, the Amiga version, I feel the emotion of being very playful, and it reminds me a little bit of the golden age of Atari and C64 music, or modular music as I personally state as it is. And there are sound effects going on in this track that kind of reminds me a little bit of, I would say, and I quote, robots. And especially feel like in the first section of the track when you're... It feels like some sort of talk, a speech of some sort. And it feels like this is what Bomberman would sound like he was talking to some extent. The track, it is very happy, and it gives me kind of this shake. I just sit on my chair, and I'm dancing, basically. Leaning, going side to side, etc. I really enjoyed this track. But as you notice, this is a stereo type of track where you hear one section of the tracks or some of the channels from the track on one side, and you hear some of the channels on the other. And this is something that they really utilized on the older PCs, such as the C64 and the Amiga. Not something you clearly would hear that much on a Super Nintendo, for example, or a NES even more, because most of these tracks were kind of mono, even if you could hear in both ears. So it feels very special, it feels very unique. So looking at the composer here for the Amiga version, it was the German Eike Steffen, and the game was developed by the Japanese studio of Hudsoft Company. The game released initially on the TurboGrafx 16 back in 1990, and the game was later then ported to both the Amiga and the Sharp X6 8000 in 1991, and lastly released on DOS and Atari ST in 1992. So theoretically, this type of Bomberman or Dyna Blaster was actually released on a majority of PCs, like to some extent. And I found that really interesting because when I grew up, I knew of Dyna Blaster, but I knew of Dyna Blaster from the perspective of the Game Boy game. And I was like, oh, but this is just Bomberman, because when I got to know Dyna Blaster on the Game Boy, I already had the Super Bomberman 2 for the Super Nintendo. So it felt a bit weird when I went back, but it was different. It was same, but different to some extent. And I found it really, really interesting. But looking at, continuing to look a little bit on the music here for the TurboGrafx was the initial release of this game. It was composed by the Japanese Jun Shikuma. And a lot of the tracks that we do here in the Amiga version were actually rearranged tracks to fit the Amiga. But for a note, when it comes to this credit music, it was actually originally in this game. It was never done by Jun Shikuma. It was really interesting to just go through because I definitely just compared both of the versions. The Amiga version does have a little bit more sound effects, etc. in it, but majority of the music for the worlds, the start of the game, themes, etc., those are kinda the same. It just has a little bit different of a soundscape. But it was so much fun to just compare these two, and I highly recommend as well for people to compare this as well to see the differences in them. Highly recommended. And looking at the composer here, Eike did some work in his early days, Bomberman being one of the first, from what I can see. Following up was the game of Hannibal and Space Job in 1993, games for DOS, or PC that is. And in 1995, he worked on both sound and music for the game Nectaris. And after Nectaris, we can see a little bit of a jump in his credits, being the next game in 2012, which is Giana Sisters Twisted Dreams. And this is a game we have talked about before, and I don't remember that we talked much about Eike, because in that game, he worked alongside Chris Hulsbeck in Machinist Supremacy, which is primarily the people working on that game or composing it, because Chris Hulsbeck was the original one who made the Giana Sisters soundtrack, and Machinist Supremacy joined in for that game to make like the more rock and roll up-tempo track of this, comparing since you can switch these sisters. I already talked about this, but just to bring a little bit of a reminder. But Eike, he did some tunes and he did some music for this game. And following up between these games, however, Eike was actually active in the community of Remix 64, and this was from the year 2004. It has nothing to do really with video game music, but as you notice on the name, it is a remix community. Much like the OC Remix, which kind of covers all the video game music and all the kind of covers and so on, Remix 64 is instead focused on making like Atari and C64 music. And while Eike was making the music over there, he did it under the name of Romeo Knight, not Romeo Knight. The year that he joined up, he actually ends up winning the award of being Best Newcomer. Maybe that's not like the biggest kind of reward, but it's always interesting to see someone new join in, and depending on how much people release that year, it's still a prestigious reward. So I'm not trying to sell him short in any sort of way. And following up in the next year, he was actually the best C64 remixer and ended up in the second place of the most innovative remix, and also the second place for remixer of the year. And looking at all the mixes and things he releases, he really likes Rob Hubbard music to remix. And if I remember correctly, I don't remember like 100%, but if I remember correctly, Rob Hubbard was either British or German. Might be wrong on that one, because information is limited in my brain. So if I'm wrong, feel free to just comment, but don't take me on my words for it. So what I say on that is not anything to take in trust for 100%, just to have it stated out there. Anyway, returning back. In 2006, he actually came in third place for the Remixer of the Year, and also third place for the most innovative remix. And even though he hasn't received any further rewards in this community, he is still much active on the Remix 64 to this date, still releasing tracks in 2024. So I'm looking forward to actually listening on more, because those remixes that he does there are really, really good. So I'm just super excited on that part to just know these kind of things, and it's so much fun. However, if we're returning back to Eike's credit list here in 2017, he makes the music and sound effects for the Android game Crystal Clash. And more to the closer to our day today, he worked on a guitar performance for Turrican Flashback for the Switch in 2021. And lastly, for the iOS games Valiant Hearts Coming Home that he worked on in 2023. And on that game, he worked specifically as a recording engineer. So it seems like he kind of moved away a little bit from being a full composer. It feels like he's doing more on technical parts of everything. And of course, seeing his name with the guitar performance for Turrican Flashbacks, it feels like he's still friends with Chris Hulsbeck. And I'm pretty sure Chris Hulsbeck is from Germany. I'm like 100% sure on that one. I'm just a little bit unsure on the Rob Hubbard thing. But Chris Hulsbeck is definitely German. And this is one of those that really worked on a lot of games. And I know a lot of people love and adore the music that he did and have done. But yeah, Dyna Blaster, as I said, this is one of the title names that we had for Bomberman on the early days, in the early era of him. They either had this Eric and the Floaters, which was the first game here in Europe, but then Dyna Blaster, due to the fact of being, well, bombs were not really okay here in Europe for some reason. I don't know. I guess it's too harsh of a word, I guess. Bomberman, etc. I don't know the backstory, to be honest. It just feels like it's violent to some extent. So Dyna Blaster felt really cool as a name and how it kind of was portrayed in the beginning. But it didn't take a lot of years before we got an official Bomberman name in the title of our tracks. And following up on this is the next track of the week, and this time it is a very special one. And this, considering like Dyna Blaster is kind of almost the only real Bomberman game that we're talking of today, so it's fun to talk about the classics. Yay! Because now we're continuing with Bomberman Wars. Sounds like a classic game, but definitely is not. I don't know any track name on this one, so it's only stated as track 14. This is from the Saturn version. So with that said, enjoy the track from Bomberman Wars. Track 14 from the game Bomberman Wars, and this was the Saturn version of the game. And my emotion for this one, very bombastic, yes, pun intended. This track reminds me of something that could have been in a Wise game. It has action, speed, but still has this kind of piano-esque sound that reminds me, I would say, almost to a Final Fantasy extent as well. I mean, you can hear the fanfare going on in the background right now. It's just crazy. Nonetheless, it really gives me off this classical RPG battle type of music. And sadly, with my research, I wasn't really able to find any information about this track, like I said, and therefore I can only assume that this is where this track is played. I didn't feel like I wanted to go through too much of because just stating and finding like random music, I did not like portray and hear this music inside of Let's Plays, etc. So I'm a little bit unsure exactly where this is played. But yeah, I would assume some sort of boss battle, to be honest. So, but looking at Bomberman Wars, we have the composers here of being the Japanese Famishin and Takuya Nishiwaki. Takuya Nishiwaki. There we go. The game was developed by the Japanese Metro Corporation, and the game was released in 1998 on both PlayStation and Sega Saturn. But however, this game was only released in Japan, which is also one of the reasons why it's so special. This has one of the first Bomberman that kind of strayed away from the original concept of the game, as it is an isometrical tactical RPG. And yeah, like when I started this episode, I did not state Metro as a company working with the Bomberman series. That is because Bomberman Wars is not in the main series of how it kind of works. It's just one of those spin-offs games that I wanted to try out a little bit more of a story with the Bomberman. So this is one of the reasons why I did not state the company that kind of sticks out. Because when it comes to the spin-off games, I didn't see Hudson Soft or Konami in any of them. Not as developer, at least. I only saw them as publishers at best. So that is one thing I just wanted to state when we're talking about Bomberman Wars at the moment. So, looking at the composers here, these are actually new ones I've never met before until this series. Not that I remember, at least. And looking at Famishin, Famishin is an alias of a Japanese composer and sound designer that has worked initially at the studio of Metro. And he or she is also someone that never released their real name as well. And this is something that we knew happened in the early days of video games in Japan, but it's interesting that this person still kinda stuck by that. So looking at Famishin, they worked at Metro up till the year of 2000, and their first game in total were the game of Gunmaster, which was for the arcade in 1994. And just to go through the games a little bit faster, I will only name a couple of titles between 1994 and 2001. We have Touride, Mouse Shooter Go Go, Vadims, Daitoride, Bomberman Party Edition, Air Race Championship, Burst Trek, Wakeboarding, exclamation mark, and Sound Diving Extreme. Those were some of the games that they worked on up till 2000. And there was a lot of games at Metro, and they basically released almost one every year. And Famishin worked on sound design, and even sound engineering. And after that last game, it takes all up until 2016 until Famishin releases their next work. Following up with the not suited for work game Seren Banka, 1,000 Colors of Love. And then follow up with the same kind of not suited for work games, Riddle Joker in 2018, and Cafe Stella and the Reaper's Butterflies. As I said, all these are not suited for work, so just to have that said again. The last game that Famishin worked on was the game of Parquet, and this game released in 2021. These not suited for work games and Parquet seems to be more of visual novel kind of games, so it feels like Famishin has found like a niche of some sort, working with music for more visual novel and storytelling type of games. And moving over to Takuya Nishiwaki, much smaller credits here, especially on the audio part. They worked a little bit on other things, but Bomberman Wars was the first one they worked on, and then following up with Bomberman Party Edition, and lastly Air Race Championship. Then they left music and the studio Metro. Nishiwaki has since 2018 worked as quality assurance, finding bugs for Nintendo, working at larger titles such as the Super Smash Bros. Series, Mario Party series, and the Zelda series. So they moved over from music and into just making sure our games are bug-free, which is nice. I would say it's very nice. But yeah, when it comes to the Bomberman, I only looked at a handful of clips for this game, and it actually looks pretty interesting, to be honest. It had a little bit more of the, like it said, the tactical RPG, and I would say the Final Fantasy Tactics series, etc. And it has this white bomber, it has this story. I find it so amazing when the full Bomberman series kind of started out as this robot working in a factory, just trying to get the hell out of there. And it turned into this full franchise today, where we have all these kind of story elements and so on. And in Bomberman Wars, we have this magic and mystery. It's like a fantasy game, but everybody has bombs all of a sudden. So screw magic, we have swords and bombs now. So bombs are still till this day fantasy material, of course, but everybody is a Bomberman of some sort. Like, it feels weird. It feels like Bomberman is sci-fi, even though it's not. So considering this and everything, Bomberman, I would say, is not set to a specific theme or genre. They're just timeless. I think that kind of states it the best. And why I'm stating it as timeless is all to the fact to the next game that we're going to listen to a track from. And this game is called Bomberman Hardball. And the track that we're going to listen to is Baseball Order. Fading out the smallest of the tracks, but also kind of the smallest information about a Bomberman game that I could find. This was Bomberman Hardball, and the track name was Baseball Order. And my emotion for this one, at this point, I don't feel it's just iconic for Bomberman games to have these playful and happy tunes. And this one really feels like it's some sort of sports/circus music combo going together. It would fit well in a really colorful racing game as well, I feel. Doesn't really have some attitude, but it kind of does, because I already feel like a victor for enjoying this track so hard. And looking at the soundtrack here for this game is actually fully unknown. There is no credits in this game, and I will talk a little bit more why as soon as we just go through this information. Because there's nothing to be found on the soundtrack itself. There's no information online that I could find. I've been trying to be really thorough in my search, trying to find, and the closest I could come up with was the name of Yun Shikuma again, the Japanese composer for a lot of the Bomberman music. However, she is not the composer for this game. And the reason for why I know this is because she exclusively worked for the main series of the Bomberman game series and has no credit for any spin-off games. And yes, Bomberman Hardball is a spin-off game. So Bomberman Hardball, or Bomberman Battles as it was called in Japan, was developed by the Japanese company Magical Company. And the game was released exclusively on the PlayStation 2 on the 7th of October 2004. So yeah, with that, due to the name, everybody knows it's a worldwide release. And looking at the game, and this is the reason why we don't really have a credit for this, I guess. It feels really weird though. Every game has some sort of credit, and not having a credit feels kind of bad in my opinion. But the game is one of those special titles where you have multiple game modes. In this, you have 4. You have the Arena, the classic Bomberman mode, that is kind of 2.5D. So every character and the world itself is 3D, but it's not fully 3D because you still have that over-the-top people are in each and every corner of the map and you just blow up the blocks again. You have tennis, you have golf, and you have baseball as well. Sadly, no bomber action, like, it's just classic sports. In this game, there is also a so-called life mode. This is a mode where you can live your life as a Bomberman in their apartment, you can customize your character, and you can watch AI-controlled matches. To me, when I looked at the gameplay on this specific mode, because there were a lot of people that actually talked about this life mode, it was fun, exciting, etc. But looking at it, it felt like you're basically playing a Tamagotchi. It's not like Bomberman is pooping on the floor and so on, but you're basically just living life. Watching TV, walking around in your apartment, getting credits for random things, and you pick out things from machines and so on. It actually felt just really weird. Why not just play the game? And anyway, who am I to judge? It just felt weird to me. All these kind of life simulation type of games, I always feel weirded out. Like, I'm playing games to get out of the world, not to play the world, right? I don't know. What are your takes on it? Anyway, Bomberman Hardball looked like a fun, exciting, because they do come with some specifics. It's not like, oh, I'm playing baseball and I'm gonna hit the ball by just pressing a button. No, the one whose pitches is choosing in a, like, think about it as a rectangle, and you can choose the corners, like the upper left corner, upper right corner, lower left corner, lower right corner, etc. And the one who's batting actually has a little bit of a hit area. You see this red dot moving around, and when the ball is thrown, you need to have that bat on that spot where the red dot is, so you're just trying to figure out where the ball is coming, and you hit that from there. So it comes in with some sort of interesting mechanics, which is interesting. It's interesting, definitely. But yeah, that was Bomberman Hardball. Yet again, another, like, when I chose these games, I was like, I haven't played this one, I haven't played that one, I haven't played this one, I haven't played that one. Listen through the music, I really found music I enjoyed for Hardball. There was a lot of music that I really enjoyed. It was very playful, very exciting music. So yeah, it is just crazy that I'm handpicking a lot of these kind of spin-off series, and over the time, the spin-off series kind of became the main series to some extent. In the Super Nintendo, we had Super Bomberman 1, 2, 3, 4, I think. I don't think there was a fifth game there, but all those were kind of the same, but they did have a story where you can play single player and have, like, fight the robot masters like a freaking Mega Man, but with a Bomberman mode. And I really loved and adored the single player mode for the second game, but one of the biggest thing was just to play the battle mode, fight your friends and everything. But all these kind of spin-offs games, even if I haven't played them myself, there are quite a hefty ones, which is interesting. So there's a lot of things going on with the Bomberman IP, and I think that's just absolutely amazing. It is so much fun that we're able to get so many games, even though I haven't heard about them myself, so I can only assume that they weren't that popular. And that was due to the sense that, well, if somebody wanted a Bomberman game, they most likely would have liked to get the classical Bomberman, where it was more of a party game. But returning back to some roots, no, I'm just joking. There's no segue to returning back to roots. We're talking about spin-off games, and we're returning back instead to some sort of single-player story mode. And the next game, or the next track that we're going to listen to, is from the game Bomberman Story, and this was for the DS, so it's Bomberman Story DS. And the track that we're going to listen to is Versus Faleena. track much more on the serious end. This was versus Faleena from the Bomberman Story DS game. And for me, who played a lot of Super Bomberman 2, this feels like a dance remix of a track from that time. I don't know. I don't know. I know fully, though, that it is not. It is a full original track. It's not like a remix of any other or rearrangement of another track from the Bomberman series, even though it feels like they have some sort of set style for it. But does have the same vibe to the music from then. I really like this track. I really do. And this is definitely boss track considering the name of the track, but it has the attitude. It's almost a bit of Western style, like I'm talking Wild West. But this is a dance music take on it. I really love this track. So my emotion is just like, I freaking love this one. I've been vibing so hard while making this episode. I've even listened to this track a couple of times just to prepare myself for it. It's not like it's hard to work on this episode. It's just that I really like this song. Anyway, composed the music for this is Masayoshi, also known as CHAMY.Ishi. The game was developed by the Japanese studio Hudson Soft Company and together co-developing with Amiga. And as you can see, this Hudson Soft is here as name. Hudson Soft. Name is here. And yeah, this is like a more official game within the series, not a spin-off, even though it was co-developed. And the game was released exclusively on the DS on March the 21st in 2007. This game does feature a mode like the classic Bomberman games, where also the DS could connect up to each other in order to play a multiplayer match. However, this game was set to be primarily as an action RPG with puzzle elements, much similar to a Zelda game, but with the Bomberman aesthetics on it. I've just looked through a little bit and it just looks really lovely. This is one of those games I really would like to get for myself to play on my DS. I haven't really checked out what a copy would cost, to be honest, but I really enjoy what I'm viewing on this one. So this is definitely going to be on my list on games I would like to have in my collection and play. Anyway, looking at the composer here, Masayoshi does have an impressive list of games that he has worked on, and he used to have a lot of different aliases and names over the time as well, but it usually has been similar to CHAMY in the credits, different versions of CHAMY. So it could be CHAMY.Ishi, etc., like this one. His first game, however, was the game Outrun back on the Genesis in 1991, and since then he has so many games done, and I will only handpick a couple of these from the years to come. So in 1995, he worked on Tempo, Zen Nihon Yoshi Pro Wrestling, Queen of Queens, and F1 Challenge. In 1999, we have Virtua Strikers 2, Evil Zone, and Sharumera. All these games were either a Dreamcast or a PlayStation release of the three last ones. In 2004, we have the fantastic game Desha the Go Final, and it is one of my favorite like PS2 games. It is so much fun with the Desha controller and everything, and it's usually one of those games I play at my friend's place. And then yet another favorite game I have, and this is my favorite for the PS2 console, Blood Will Tell, Tesuwa Osamu's Dororo. And this is a game we have talked about in the podcast before, so I am 100% sure that we have talked about Masayoshi before. But I don't remember that we went through each and every game. Maybe we did, maybe we didn't. I don't recall fully. Anyway, following up in 2006, we have Cooking Mama and Yoshi's Island DS. In 2009, Zamisya Harui no Gekiro, Rolling Stone Drum King, The Witch Tale, Spectrobe's Origins, and Cookin' Mama 3 Chop, and We Shear 2. It's a lot of games in 2009. And coming closer to the newer dates, we have Super Mario Party in 2018, Cooking Mama Cookstar in 2020, and lastly, Mario Party Superstars in 2021. Sorry for the mispronunciation. And I'm so sorry with the Japanese names as always, but I am a Swedish dude, so bear with me on that one. I'm trying my best here. I'm trying. There are still a lot of more games on this list. These were, as I said, only a handful of games picked. Masayoshi has either been working as a composer or the music director in all of his roles. And in the recent years, we can see that he moved over to the more music director than he did before. So it's so much more fun to see that it takes him more on a lead, trying to shape the soundtracks of the games that it works on. And for me, Bomberman DS was a really fantastic soundtrack to listen through. I had a really hard time trying to figure out which track I wanted to go with, but in order to get a little bit more of this RPG kind of vibe to it, versus Faleena was a really good choice. With that said, the last track that we're going to listen to today is definitely my favorite track of the week. I haven't played this game. I know of the prequel to this game. I'm talking about Super Bomberman R2. So I know about Super Bomberman R. I was a little bit unsure that they even released a second game in the series. So when I saw the name, I was like, cool, they released another one. Awesome. And apparently they released it in 2023. So I was even more shocked by that information because the first game was even more older then. But yeah, the soundtrack, however, is something I've been stuck with for so long at the moment for this episode. I had a really hard time trying to figure out which track I wanted to go with. Highly recommend everybody to listen through the full freaking album because it's goddamn amazing. Goddamn amazing. But don't take my words for it. Listen to this track from Super Bomberman R2, and the track name is Battle Tutorial. Super Bomberman R2 Battle Tutorial, and I'm just speechless in how good this one is. For some reason, it really has this kind of Japanese-esque vibe over it. For me, I'm getting taken back to like Gambare Goemon series or something like that. It feels very like Edo time Japanese styled music, but it's very playful still. It was really hard. Like I said, I'm like speechless, like how good the soundtrack for this game is. And with the Super Bomberman R2, not R2, but with the R series, this is the time where Konami actually took over as well, and we could really see some differences in how music is portrayed within the series. It's looking at Jun Shikuma and how she portrayed the music of Super Bomberman. It had more of a jazz fusion kind of style to it, but right now we had more of this dancey, upbeat kind of style. And of course, with a full album, we have some difference as well, and you will surely know soon enough why. But I love this soundtrack. It was a real blast listening through. As I said, I was left listening to this track on repeat almost because it was so freaking good. The soundtrack is available over, like some of these tracks are available over on Spotify as well. Highly recommend to just go through there and listen to it, because it did release like a summary. You have the R series, you have Super Bomberman R Online, and then some extras. So it's a 3-disc album. So check it out. God freaking damn it. Anyway, so the soundtrack for this game was composed, and this was really hard because there haven't been a lot of people posting the credits of this game to this date. So it wasn't really fully in on a lot of pages and so on. So like credits were kind of out there. So I really needed to dig deep, go through multiple videos, and finally find the credits for this game. But the soundtrack here was composed by the following Japanese composers. We have Akihiro Teruta, Momoyo Ando, Tatsumi Adachi, and Yukiko Suwa. I hope I really pronounced those correctly, even though I was pronouncing them slowly. But that's kind of what I need sometimes. The game here was developed by the Japanese studio Konami Digital Entertainment. So yeah, with the R-Series, Konami took over this IP of Bomberman and created this fantastic game series. And the game, the Super Bomberman R2, was released on the 13th of September 2023. So it's not super old. The game did have a wide release on the following platforms: PC, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, PS5, and the Xbox Series. And this is currently the last game in the series from when I release this episode. And it kind of is back to the basics. It's focusing more on the battle mode, and it also includes this fancy single-player mode yet again. However, this game does make some twists as well, adding like mechanics of a defense and attack mode called Castle Mode. There is a battle royale called Battle 64, and there is so much more. Just check the game out. I mean, but most fun of all, they have a stage editor where the players themselves can make their own stages for these castle modes. So you can put blocks and walls and so on, like however you would like. And it's so interesting because with the R-Series, they introduced like a mini-map as well, especially for the larger maps. And I think if we're excluding the spin-offs with the RPG and so on, I think this is the first of its kind where we can see a mini-map for a Bomberman game with a classical mode in thought as well. It was so interesting, but at the same time, this defense and attack mode felt a bit weird because there's multiple players versus one player defending, and people can upload their own levels, etc. It was interesting, but weird, because it was so new, I would say. Anyway, seems like a fun game, but most of all, for me right now, I'd rather listen to this track. Not this track, but this soundtrack on repeat rather than playing the game at the moment, because the music is so freaking good on top of just playing another classical Bomberman game. But anyway, the single player with the cinematics and how it's played, it seems very playful and interesting. So of course, this is something I would like to just see if I could get into and play the single player yet again. But looking at the people who worked on this, all the 4 composers, I'm actually very surprised in how we got this kind of funky dance album or soundtrack for this game. Because listen in, I mean, buckle up your freaking seats right now, because we're going in for a ride with a couple of these composers, because they've made a lot of music and they've been employees for Konami for a long time. And for people that already know, I hope you really buckle up, because there's a lot of famous series Konami have been working on. So starting out with the first composer, Akihiro Teruta here. Been working on majority of games from the studio of Konami, starting out in 1997 with Suikoden Tendo 108 Sei. Other titles that he has worked on are for games such as the Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty in 2001, Metal Gear Solid 2 Substance in 2002, Metal Gear Solid Portable in 2006, Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of Patriots 2008. You see how it goes on. It's just a lot of Metal Gear Solid. Ending out with a little bit of the older Metal Gear Solid with Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker from 2010. Then it steps in between with the game Never Dead from 2012. Then returning back to Metal Gear series with Snake Eater 3D in 2012, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance in 2013, Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes from 2014, Phantom Pain in 15, Survive in 18, and then we have another game which is not a Metal Gear Solid, which is Super Bomberman R, the first game, which also releases in 2018. After the Bomberman, we get Getsu Fumaden, Undying Moon, and Super Bomberman are online in 2021, Crime Site in 2022, and the last game on the list are collections. So we get the Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty Master Collection, Metal Gear 3, Snake Eater Master Collection, Solid Master Collection in 2023. And last but not least are the games Silent Hill: The Short Message, and lastly Castlevania Dominus Collection in 2024. Moving over to the second composer, we get Momoyo Ando, newer in the games of making soundtracks and so on, and has of course a less of a track record. But starting out with the iOS game Castlevania Grimoire of Souls in 2019, Getsu Fumaden, Undying Moon, and Super Bomberman are online, and Castlevania Advanced Collection in 2021, and lastly Silent Hill: The Short Message in 2024. Looking at the third composer, Tatsuya Adachi, he worked almost exclusively with Konami titles as well, starting out with Gambare Goemon, Kuru Nara Koi, Ayashi Geika no Koroi Kate, which was released in 1998. Tatsumi has taken a bit of another route when composing music to Akihiro, following up with a whole other series, being the International Superstar Soccer 99 for the Game Boy Color, which was his first, then Fisherman's Bait 2, Big Old Bass in 1999. We also have different series that I will jump into a few, landing in 2001 with the Pro Evolution Soccer games. Then in 2004, we get Suikoden 4, then Suikoden Tactics in 2005, and lastly Suikoden 5 in 2006. Jumping back to the PES series, the Pro Evolution Soccer, we get the 2007 with PES 2008, 2008 we get PES 2009, and the same pattern goes up to PES 2013, which released in 2012. Lots of numbers, lots of PES. Getting... right now I want the real PES. It's like, get one of those. Would be nice. Would be real nice. But then he actually joins into the Metal Gear team with Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain in 2015. Metal Gear Survive, he works on that one as well, together with Super Bomberman R in 2008. Then Getsu Fumaden, Undying Moon, and Super Bomberman R Online in 2021, and that's it. And following up with the last composer, Yukio Suwa, who has not done as well a lot of titles, starting out with the iOS game Silent Hill: The Escape in 2008, Super Bomberman R in 2018, and then Super Bomberman Online, and lastly Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush Duel: Dawn of the Battle Royale, that released in 2021. And that is it, folks. Those were the Bomberman games that I picked out of the series. And of course, we needed to stop with the last one because the soundtrack was just too good. The soundtrack was just too good. But I kind of liked going a little bit in a chronological order of how the games were released and how Bomberman soundtrack kind of evolved over time. But at the same time, I kind of went out of that understanding because a majority of the tracks were spin-offs games. Of course, the spin-off games are not really a good estimate of when we're looking into games and how they evolve, but it's still history of the Bomberman series. It started out being just this quirky little game where a robot just wanted to get out of this battle, and now we have this full galactic universe with Bomberman flying around in spaceships and so on. He's been through magical shit as well with iOS, with isometric RPG styles and so on, and it feels like Bomberman has been everywhere, having his story told over and over again while still just enjoying life in a party mode, bombing each other up, becoming the super golden bomber, becoming really fast, getting strong bombs, etc. But it's still really fun. I love that. I really do. Bomberman has always been part of my childhood to some extent, and it's been so much fun, but I haven't really followed in Bomberman's footsteps. Instead, I kind of like my old pal, the White Bomber in Super Bomberman 2, and I still would rather just pick up that one and continue playing. But now that I've gone through a lot of other games, I feel like, dude, I've been missing out. So yeah, I will definitely look up more of these games, and is there any games that you found interesting in this episode, or are you like me, interested in exploring more into the series of Bomberman? Or have you even played the last one with the different modes and so on? Which one is your favorite? I would love to hear a comment, if you comment over on anything really. But anyway, if you liked episodes much like this one, you'll find Gameable audio over on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, and don't forget to subscribe to our amazing YouTube channel. Just search for Gameable audio and you'll find us there as well. And feel free to follow and comment on one of our social medias. Find us on either Facebook or on Instagram. Just search for Gameable audio, comment and follow. I mean, you can even give comments over on Spotify, and of course, I will see them. I will answer them. And if you want to hang out and talk video game music and so on, feel free to join in on the Discord as well. You'll find all the information in the episode description. And if you would like to support my work with this podcast and help me out a little bit financially, think about becoming a Patreon backer. And the current awesome backers that we do have today is Daniel Onemark, Mike Björkholm, Lars Schenström, Titti Schenström, Kevin Wikström, Sandres Wikström, Mats El Kebabo Tapper Holmqvist, and Alexander Haldén. Thank you so much for supporting my work with the podcast. And for people who are still thinking about becoming a Patreon, feel free to do any sort of tier. The least one is $1 each month, and it's up to $10 each month. So it's still pretty cheap considering all the different services we have out there. And it goes for a good cause, which is financially supporting me and my work with this podcast if you enjoy this one. And for me to pay back all the different loot I get from guests in these episodes, or things I can come over from supports and so on. All those will be raffled out to my Patreon backers. So there's a lot of value of becoming a Patreon backer. If you just win one thing, it is still a lot of value, I would say. And of course, the higher the tier, the more possibility it is for you to get these rewards. And since we don't have too many backers today, it is quite easy to get those rewards as well. But it's all random. It's not me who handpicks anything, so feel free. Links to where you can either buy and support the composers behind the music of the Bomberman games that we talked about. You find those in the episode description as well. And for the next episode, we're having a special. I'm getting guested by none other than Falcon Shield, which is super interesting. And I'm just super stoked on getting to know him a little bit more. I don't know if you guys have been listening through This Is War, which is one of those tracks that I've listened to a lot of times, and is also one of the reasons why I got to know Falcon Shield a little bit more, because it randomly popped up on my Spotify and I really enjoyed it. So I listened it a little bit more on what he has been doing. And he is joining in for an episode to talk a little bit more about his development with this project that he's been working on for a long time. So if you have any questions or anything, feel free to join the Discord and be sure to write them there before we record that episode. So always feel free to join in, talk about it, and make your voice heard. The episode theme music was, as always, composed by the amazing Thor Myrdal. I am your host, Christofer Schenström, and this was episode 55 on Gameable Audio about Have You Heard of Bomberman? Thank you so much for listening in, and see you guys next time!